And now it is my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Rajesh Iyer, who is a technology consulting partner at EY in Canberra. Rajesh has a lot of industry and IT experience spread between Australia and Singapore, has had roles in management, sales, pursuits, and practice leadership, and also has been a great advocate for solution architecture and project and program management. Rajesh is going to be joining me as we both talk to the question of balancing purpose and data. Being purpose-led in leveraging data to drive business value and community confidence. As technology and government leaders, we recognize that we have reached a critical tipping point with the advancement of digital and data with AI now, and that it is boundless in its potential. It has an ability to revolutionize public service like never before. These are incredibly exciting times. The rapid shift forward into using data and generating actionable insights has a powerful potential to support local, state, and federal governments in foreseeing and understanding the diverse needs of their citizens and businesses, and in turn, the opportunity to deliver better social and economic outcomes if we get it right. We will no doubt feel that that agencies and organizations at this summit who have already made significant progress, many of you sitting in the room today, are already leveraging technology and making data-informed decisions with great results. Indeed, Rajesh and I are about to share some of those personal experiences and relevant examples from around the globe. As we share these stories, we will do so using a very specific lens, and one that Minister Deb did talk through. I would love you to think about, as you hear from all our amazing stories and from our speakers here today, put the lens of, are we using it with purpose? And this is important. What does purpose mean, you may ask? Simply put, purpose is the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. As leaders, purpose should be our North Star in defining our priorities and goals and the way in which we make investments. Being purpose-led will help us use data, the right data, from the best sources for the right reasons, only asking for what is needed to achieve our objectives, storing it only for as long as is necessary, and above all, using it responsibly to serve your purpose. Whatever your role is in harnessing data for public service, purpose must be the touchstone we continually come back to. This is crucial because so many ways in which we could steer government to use data, but only a select few are aligned with our intended purpose. The volume and speed at which data is growing and is generated in the world today is almost unbelievable, and its growth rate is only accelerating. To put it in context, most of the world's current data holdings was created in just the last 2 years, growing at a staggering rate, reflecting the reality that government and its agencies are also grappling with. In addition to the need to use resources responsibly and making sure we do so with benefit to our communities. What is really interesting is that if you are purpose-led and purpose-led projects, you are more likely, 57% of the time, to deliver on the benefits, 50% more likely to finish on time, and 45% more likely to stay within budget. We are only beginning to unmask the capabilities of AI, and particularly generative AI, as powerful tools in utilizing this massive resource that is data, and also prompting important and needed discussion about the guidelines for its ethical use. We should not be afraid to embrace this technology, but we must do so with purpose. We in this room are tasked with leading the next revolution. Our goal is to navigate this vast array and sea of information responsibly and effectively. We must put in place robust and thoughtful processes and practices to guide us in using these intelligent tools in a way that harnesses the potential of the technology whilst also ensuring that the purpose influences everything from which we do. We also need to be cognizant of the collection and analysis in the decision-making process, policy implementation, and measurement, some things in which Chris Fechner spoke of. This may sound like a very simple idea. Of course, we want to use data and AI for good. But in practice, as we know, well-intentioned technology solutions may not always align with our purpose and may sometime result in poor community outcomes. As government data leaders, we can work together to ensure this does not happen, to continually bring our teams back to what matters, and that is to purpose and values, to focus on citizens and business outcomes, to meet the needs of the community of people that government is here to serve, to ensure data and AI are used for good. This morning, we are going to share some learnings from projects we have worked with and been involved in that have taken a purpose-led approach using AI. And we will start that with digital trade, and Rajesh will take you through that. Over to you, Rajesh.
Thanks, Permenthri. The COVID-19 pandemic prompted governments to think very differently about how digital and data could be used to make our supply chains more resilient and our trade ecosystem more interoperable and efficient. At EY, we have been working with many countries to help build their digital infrastructure. Thank you. How do you move this forward? This one, okay. I'll start with a few examples. We built AI models to detect anomalies in the live sensor data that was being thrown off cranes at a major port. These models flagged early and otherwise unknown signs of failure and recommended maintenance actions to sustain the port's productivity by minimizing downtime. It was imperative to design these AI models specifically for a low rate of false alarms to avoid negative impacts on productivity and trust, so as to not to defeat the purpose. We also built AI models to more accurately predict ship arrivals at a port so that port workers could be rostered on only when needed. This allowed the port operator to get savings, annual savings of almost $10 million in their operations. For a customs client, we created machine learning models to identify import permits that had a higher probability of containing contraband. This improved the rate of success for search teams. In each of these examples, we began with a conversation about how the solution was going to support organizational strategy and business priorities. Now, these could be cost savings, improvements in productivity, a better experience for port workers, and also to reduce smuggling. But once this decision was made, we made sure that all further decisions were to support the achievement of this purpose. So, as a hypothetical conversation, imagine we are designing a digital border compliance process for Australia. This is hugely important for SMEs, to multinationals, and to the government. Enabling cost-effective and efficient trade has enormous potential to improve Australia's productivity and competitiveness in the international market. Given this, what would our purpose statements be for our border compliance solution? Firstly, maintaining national security and biosecurity. Secondly, making Australia more attractive to international trade by speeding up processes and reducing the administrative burden for trading parties. And thirdly, supporting sustainable practices and reducing carbon footprint. Based on these purpose statements, we might design a trade single window, a digital portal where traders or transporters could submit all relevant data needed to determine whether goods are admissible in a standard format and once only to border control officials. And by doing this, we'd also be hitting our sustainability purpose by moving to paperless digital trade processes, thereby reducing carbon footprint. Now, that's easy to say, but hard to do, because when we shift data decisions back to purpose, we come up against new challenges. Now, here are some of the contemporary issues that we have faced with and had to think about along with our clients as we have created purpose-led solutions. We'll start with data governance. In a purpose-led implementation, data governance must set appropriate boundaries for data use and to set access limits. Now, when working with digital supply chains, we are acutely aware that sensitive data was being collected. Now, it is vitally important to create confidence that this data would not be misused. And sometimes data privacy laws also need to be updated. The second one, and I think this has been spoken about quite a bit this morning, is cybersecurity. For example, late last year, 40% of Australia's maritime freight came to a standing halt when a second largest port operator came under a cyber attack. Now, at that time, this led many people to make the case for retaining paper-based processes. Now, I'm going to push back on that idea, because as trade volumes grow, the notion that we can rely on paper-based business continuity fallback plans is becoming less and less realistic. Our purpose-led focus should be to architect a digital supply chains for resilience and security to support the flow of trade. Moving to the third point, regulation. In some cases, we need to challenge whether regulatory changes are needed to help our data-driven solutions achieve their purpose. Right now, Australia's regulations are too complex for trading businesses to thrive, especially the SMEs. We have more than 200 cross-border trade regulations and 145 cross-border systems being administered by 29 government agencies. Information duplication alone costs Australia around $431 million a year. Now, here we can learn from our friends in the UK, where the Electronic Trade Documents Act now gives digital and paper documents the same legal status. In September last year, just 2 months after this legislation was passed, a valve produced in the UK was received in Singapore without a single paper document, the first truly digitalized shipment ever. The fourth important point is data sharing agreements. We must get the data models right between government and organizations. Now, if our purpose is to facilitate trade, that means identifying the least number of data elements required. Instead of asking for everything, which increases the cost of compliance, slows the system down, defeats the purpose, and creates trading friction in Australia, we must agree only on the minimum data set that is required. Now, I know that this very much goes against the grain for data nerds like me, but when it comes to developing data-driven solutions, more is not necessarily better. Moreover, it's not okay to place an unnecessary administrative burden on trading companies just because having more data would look cool. And the fifth one is a federated data model. We need to agree on a federated data model to enable efficient data exchange and collaboration while respecting the sovereignty and security concerns of each participant. Now, the point is, when we are facilitating conversations about how to architect a federated data model, we must keep bringing the participants back to purpose. We must ask human-centric questions like, One, will that create additional costs or administrative burden for businesses or government? And importantly, what's the minimum set of data required to achieve our purpose? We must ensure that our efforts to get better outcomes don't result in unintended consequences for the people we serve. And we must challenge the status quo, knowing that using data and AI offers more approaches to solve entrenched problems. Now, this brings us to our second example this morning on a completely different topic, and Permenthri is going to share a case study of what's possible when you apply data and AI to combat the thorny issue of homelessness.
Thank you, Rajesh. For decades, EY teams have worked with governments across the world trying to combat homelessness. In fact, Minister Dibb talked a little bit about homes and finding homes for people. What's become abundantly clear is that money alone does not solve the problem. Each year, governments expend huge amounts of resources to deal with the impact of homelessness after it reaches crisis point. Yet few well-intentioned initiatives move the dial significantly. Our perspective is that, like so many other social challenges we face today, that it is important to address the root causes and understand the predictors and signals of where harm is likely to occur and where people may become vulnerable. This is where data and AI can play a vital role to augment the insights and the experience that caseworkers and others in social services bring. Data and AI can be used for good to address some of our toughest challenges, like tackling homelessness, hopefully before it starts. Now, government agencies and NGOs and related entities amass enormous stores of data on vulnerable citizens across a broad range of issues, ranging from health and social welfare services. We know that sharing this information would enhance care coordination, lower costs, and improve outcomes. The problem, of course, is that the data is siloed within and across the agencies, programs, and sectors. This have historically been for good reasons, to protect people, respect their privacy, or simply because the technology was just not there, or the legislation did not permit it. The technology has advanced, and now making rapid strides, and looking at what may become more possible. Now we can integrate, match, and merge data from disparate internal and external sources. And we can not only get a complete picture of a vulnerable person, we can use AI to apply predictive analytics to make earlier interventions and to prevent crisis from occurring. If we are united on our purpose, that is, to prevent harm and address areas like homelessness. Legislation may lag, but data and technology, but most importantly, the will now exists to do better. This was the goal for the UK borough of Maidstone. And in 2018, this borough, Maidstone, started to see a significant rise in the impact of homelessness, by up to nearly 60%. So the council turned to us to design a new homelessness and rough sleeper strategy, a preventative service model aimed at stopping people before they went over the cliff, rather than being the ambulance at the bottom. Together with our data and analytics partner, EY designed and built a tool called OneView. It is a data and analytics tool that brings together data and various sources to identify those at risk of future homelessness. The insights from OneView have enabled the council to transform how they support vulnerable groups. Caseworkers can now identify the households most at risk of becoming homeless, up to 8 weeks in advance of it happening. Then they intervene to diffuse the problem. Sometimes that means connecting a family with other government agencies. Sometimes that means providing a temporary rent assistance program or negotiating on behalf of people with their landlords. What happens when you do that is extraordinary. In the initial pilot of households, the tool identified where those people were that needed assistance. Fewer than 2% went into temporary accommodation, whereas when the council did not provide any assistance, that figure rose to nearly 20%. Since Maidstone started using the tool, the borough has seen a 40% reduction in the escalation of homelessness. Now, homelessness is complex, often rooted in multiple and cumulative disadvantages. It can also be caused by a simple change in circumstances requiring a temporary solution. And when that is the case, those issues can be solved comparatively quickly, easily, and cheaply to prevent families from ending up on the street. And this allows for the specialist services to put forward their resources and be there for those most in need. And these dedicated, more complex cases can then have the caseworkers put to them to solve those problems, while the simpler change in circumstance ones can be dealt with much more effectively, much earlier in the process. Maidstone's experience shows us that a purpose-led, data-driven government decision-making has the power to transform, to shift the perception of homelessness as an unavoidable outcome to something that can be addressed by a preventative approach that anticipates and intervenes early. This is just one small example of how data can level the playing field for citizens, moving towards greater equity. When agencies can share data and get more comprehensive insights into an individual and their family's specific needs, in turn, this can lead to more effective, personalized service provision. But that's not to undermine the checks and balances that need to ensure that data is used purposefully. But there must be a balance. Citizens and communities expect government to do better along that journey, not just when they reach crisis point, especially if we have the data and can share and connect those disparate systems. I'm now going to hand back to Rajesh just to conclude us.
As demonstrated by these examples, and no doubt as will be affirmed by other stories that you're likely to hear during this day, in getting data and AI right and leading with purpose, we have the unique opportunity to create a future where governments are more responsive, citizens are more empowered, and societies are more resilient than ever before. To achieve this future, we need to stay connected to our purpose, or the why. Remember, data and AI are enablers, and we have been speaking about this right through this morning. And they are not the end goal. No matter how powerful and insightful they may be, their use must always be driven by purpose. So as you go through the sessions today, here are 3 better questions that will keep you thinking and coming back to the need to balance purpose and data. The first one, how can we ensure that our use of data and AI is always purpose-led, and as a result, how do we frame the scope of any data activity with purpose and people at the center by addressing some of these points? Number 1, will it support those who are vulnerable or at risk of harm? Number 2, will it drive business value for our organization? And number 3, will it build community and business confidence if used and acted upon? The second overall question can be, how can we ensure that the improvements for leveraging data and AI align with our agency's purpose and values? And the third larger question could be, how can we foster a culture of purpose-led data use within our agency, and what steps can we take to uplift capability in our leaders and our people to maintain this culture as we continue to innovate and evolve. Ultimately, as data leaders, our job is to help teams make the connection between their work and purpose, between their work and building trust, between the work and doing good in the community. The power of data and AI is breathtaking. It is easy to become fascinated by the intellectual pursuit of the technical and the underlying technology rather than see its potential for good and its application towards purpose. As you go through the conference today, I'd love you to think about when you use data and AI, how will you use it to drive purposeful outcomes for your department or agency to deliver the greatest value for the citizens and businesses you serve, and ultimately build the communities and societies that we all want to live in. Okay, I think with that, we'd like to hand it back to you to see if you have any questions for us.
We'll take one question. We're just conscious of the time. Anyone for a question? Yes.
It's good to hear a lot of things about data governance. Yeah, but the biggest challenge is the cultural shift and the leadership uplift, agreeing the leadership, what we are doing in the agency, and supporting the teams, supporting the domains, and along with the data quality, which plays a more high importance. Whatever we do in the AI, without data quality, it's not much useful. So basically, the cultural shift and data quality and the leadership support, how are we going to incorporate with this complex data evolving, and the data is moving so fast, and the technology is moving so fast, and there are so many competitive technologies.
Okay, I'll try to address that question. So when you look at data quality, I think the first thing that we need to do is to address data quality at source, right? I think often when we build data platforms and data warehouses, we ingest data from sources, and if it's garbage in, it's garbage out, and I think that's a cliched statement. But so I think the important aspect is to drive organizational change so that data that goes into the source systems is of the highest quality, so that when it gets extracted into platforms that are using AI and generative AI, that it makes more sense. And I think towards that, it's very important. And as we do projects with our clients, we understand that it's not just the technological aspect that needs to be catered to. A lot of our effort goes in building organizational change, in changing the mindset of people, and to ensure that whatever is being fed into the system is appropriate, and the fact that they own the data. And that's why data governance related conversations become very important as we set up data platform projects. The other thing that we could also start looking at is, and we have started looking at it, is to see how generative AI can be used to fill the data gaps. Because as we, especially in the source systems, and I think that is something that we will start seeing getting more evolved over time. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And I know that the sessions today and tomorrow will probably spend a lot more time grappling with that. Thank you, Rajesh. Appreciate your time.